So the title of this video is the same as a video I posted a little less than 2 months ago. But before I get to why I'm saying women will save our republic, let me go over some of what has been happening, which I think is very positive, particularly if you assess the situation from the vantage point of death by 1,000 cuts rather than a single or even 2 or 3 events that signify a radical change, which is always unlikely to happen in any political environment. We live in a system where presidents are sworn in, and unless hell freezes over, they're going to get their 4 years, or certainly the party will get 4 years. That's just the way it is. And there are reasons to think that that might be a good thing rather than a bad thing, because if you're getting revolutionary activity in the middle of one such period, it probably signifies something horrific is going on, which is probably best avoided. But if we look at the trajectory of this administration during 2025, it's pretty clear, pretty obvious that they're downtrending, and they're downtrending badly, primarily because of the way things are going for the man at the top. It's clear as can be. Just look at what has happened in recent days. First, we have the fact that there's an election that clearly shows they're having major problems. That is clear as can be. You then notice that they were already anticipating, if not for that election, for later elections, they were trying to redistrict everything. Well, that's running into more and more snags. Indiana might still do it, but for now they're resisting. A judge in Texas is now putting the Texas redistricting in doubt. So that's not going as well as they had planned. And then in the meantime, the shutdown is happening. The public is pointing fingers more at Republicans than at Democrats, even when Democrats decided to end it, which I think was the responsible thing to do. And indeed, within days, the script changed because of the Epstein files. And you can begin to think, well, maybe that was one of the reasons, because once the shutdown ended, then Adelita Grijalva could be sworn in, and then she could be the last vote, and then the rest would follow. And then we get 427 to 1 in the House and basically 100 to nothing in the Senate for passing the initiative. By the way, we know Trump was definitely against, or he would not have lobbied so hard to try to stop it. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, was also apparently very upset that the Senate so expeditiously moved it forward. But there it is. It's been done. Now, of course, I'll see comments on the channel where people say, it doesn't mean anything. They're going to scrub the files. They're going to do something, anything, to prevent the information from coming out. I will agree that the likeliest way is to stall by pointing to the fact that there is an ongoing investigation. That's what they'll do. But that's politically damaging, politically toxic even, because the problem is not going to go away. In keeping it in the news, things will keep coming out. And so this is not a good thing. Even if, yes, it's true, very unlikely that they would release files anytime soon, if ever, with Trump's name all over them. But that's already highly suspected. And there you have to point to the numbers the man is getting. And they're very poor. He's in the 30s now. If he keeps going this way, he might find himself in George W. Bush high 20s numbers at some point. This, at minimum, means elections are in great peril. There's no doubt about it. Another area where things are clearly not working is this initiative of his where he directs his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to prosecute people he doesn't like, and probably remember the thing with Comey and Letitia James and Adam Schiff. Well, that case now is falling apart because Lindsay Halligan, the lawyer that finally took it on because no one else wanted to because there's nothing there, she took it on and then she proceeded to basically do something illegal by either forging the signature or submitting something to the judge from the grand jury that is incorrect, which apparently can mean years in prison. This is what Trump does to people. He just ropes them into things and then they get themselves in a lot of trouble. But this is a huge embarrassment. Now they can't prosecute him anymore because they did it right under the wire. The statute of limitations was about to expire. Well, now they can't do it anymore because now it has expired and they flubbed their one chance. And this is something that you see with this guy. You know, so he used to say, only the best people. No, actually, it's only the worst people. And this doesn't play well. He knows it is why he's so totally rattled. And I saw this report in which it appears they're putting him in places now where he feels comfortable so that he won't be angry all the time like he was during the recent meeting with the Saudi Arabian prince, who is involved pretty clearly in the murder and chopping up of a journalist, Khashoggi. And he actually said, well, things happen. This is the way he dismissed it. He was being asked questions by reporters. He called the reporter insubordinate because she asked a question he didn't like. Insubordinate to who? To whom? She's a reporter. There's no subordinate. There's no boss-employee relationship. She's just reporting on the news. This man is clearly rattled. So then they put him in places like that McDonald's convention, McDonald's, whatever that was, where he can talk about Coke and sugar and French fries and how a year ago he did that McDonald's thing where he was serving people Big Macs, which, by the way, that's another thing. The report showed where he was then in his energy, in his presentation, and how much more alive and vigorous he seemed a year ago than he seems today. There's a clear and obvious downtrending. This goes to all the talk by me and others about his declining health. Health doesn't always decline suddenly. It can, and I'm strongly suspicious that it might in this case as well because of the urinary cycle, but just as often, health can be the death by 1,000 cuts. It's a slow decline. It's definitely there. It's definitely happening. So, bottom line, things are not going well. They're definitely reflected in his chart. Now to the point of the title. Notice that women, even if in a sense it's not necessarily directly intended, meaning like they're on your team, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I noticed comments where people say, well, yeah, sure, she's helping out, in quotes, but she's still a Republican, I don't trust her. No one is asking anyone to trust people that are Republican, especially if they're MAGA, but this goes to the enemy of my enemy is my friend, number one. Number two, there's some slight chance she may change. Who cares? The point is, she's a woman. So is Lauren Boebert. In other words, whether it's willful and conscious or accidental, it's the same principle. And this is where, from my vantage point, it's like I'm seeing Eris, the planet Eris on planet Earth. You see it through those women. You also see it through all the survivors of Epstein. This is what's bringing him down. That's that Eris parked in the 9th house, squaring his Venus. And when it comes to the notion of women rising, I did some research, and what I discovered is that if you go back 40 years in our political life, you notice that 40 years ago, 30 years ago, there could be 2, 3, 4 women governors in the United States. This grew slowly so that by the 2000s, it was up to 6, 7, and then it remained at around 8, 9 for some time. Now it's up to 14. This will continue to grow. This is the effect of Eris. The Eris discovery in 2005 especially propels women forward. And so it's on the way to happening, but we can't be impatient. If we were looking at this, or rather, if people look at this in the future, just like we look at history in the past, 10-year blocks are nothing. If you're living in those periods, you can get impatient. But from the vantage point of change, things happen in a zone and they become real over decades. And so it's growing, and yes, it could possibly shoot up more dramatically at some point. But the point is that it is growing. And the point is also that women are having tremendous impact on the way things are turning out. Witness what is happening with Epstein, notice where the damage is coming from, and notice that more and more women are rising. And of course, the final argument, the most obvious argument, is that it is well known that the majority of Democratic votes come from women. If you removed all women from the voting, Democrats would almost always lose. I would say it would be a zero chance of winning. But because of women, Democrats are winning about half the time, if you look at the last 50, 60 years. And in the current environment with what we're seeing, and especially because the astrology for this guy is incredibly complicated. Right now, it is reflecting pretty precisely what is happening to him, because it's one thing to say, yes, you're at health risk. It's not just that. Multiple subjects are involved, and they will continue to be problematic for him going into December, going into January, February. And it doesn't let up. This continues. All right, I'll stop there. I think we're doing quite well. If you want to encourage yourself with just how well we're doing, imagine if a month ago someone showed you what would happen around this time. You would have thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. I think that's the perspective to hold on to, especially because for the GOP and for Trump, things are not going to get better. They're going to get worse. Thank you for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. Thank you.